This is Upside Down in the Middle of Nowhere, chapter 14, 15, 16, and 17. Chapter 14. Lord have mercy, Mima said for the 100th time in 5 minutes. Poor Mima and her and Miss Tilly had been in choir together since before I was born, and I sat on the floor next to where Mima was collapsed in her chair, and I hugged her hand, wishing I knew something I could say to help her feel better. Daddy was outside trying to move the huge tree, and none of us talked about what had happened, but we all knew. I was thankful right then we couldn't see through the trash bag covering the window. Upset fluttered around in my belly. Mama wouldn't stop cleaning and wiping the little ones down with a wet rag, and she passed out waters and told us to drink them, whether we were thirsty right then or not. She went on about staying hydrated and keeping our strength up, and it didn't seem to me that we needed a whole lot of strength to put in the living room while the world got flipped on its head outside. I hoped Mama was drinking water too when Celie sat on the floor in front of Mima and went to reading out loud. Mima rocked in her chair and tears fell and didn't wipe them off. Me and Celie did the best we could to help Mima with her grieving, my sister with her reading, and me with my hand hugging. Daddy stood still as a statue, taking up most of the space inside the doorway, his hand held tight to the doorknob. The heaven-like glow coming from behind him cast a shadow, making it impossible to see anything but the dark outline of his body. The way the light surrounded and held him all but took my breath away, and it was the most beautiful I'd ever seen Daddy. I ran to Daddy and wrapped my arms around his waist, grateful to have him back inside with us. And as I hugged him, I could see that the outside world had took on an orangey pink look. It was a color I ain't never seen in no crayon box before. It was beautiful. The half gone trees, the sky, the beat up houses, even the people I seen roaming around outside. Everything had took on a swirly orangey pink color. I stepped to the side of Daddy with my mouth wide open, just gazing at the sight of it all. Armani, get in here and shut the door, Mama shouted. But Mama, it's so beautiful, come see. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. Celia and Georgie were at my side, squeezing in to take a look. Both of them said, Whoa. It looks like heaven, Celia said in her whispery voice, and I was fixing to agree with her when Daddy stuck an arm in front of us and swooped us back so we could slam the door shut. Daddy, we all winced, looking up into his face. He looked down at us with watery eyes and crinkled eyebrows. There's nothing beautiful about what's happening on the other side of that door. Daddy wouldn't sit still. He paced back and forth, pulling back a corner of trash bag covering the window and peeking out. He'd walk all quick to where the back screen door used to be and stare into the backyard. Cricket took the whining so loud that she wore everyone's nerves, and Daddy stopped his pacing. Armani, please do something with that dog. She probably needs to go outside to do her business like a real dog, right, Daddy? Georgie jumped to his feet so fast he nearly fell right back down again. I'll take her. When Daddy opened the door and let them out, everything outside was soft and quiet, all drippy and then thick and peaceful. The storm's over, Georgie said with a grin, and it looks like we dodged a bullet. Uncle T-Bone was right, Daddy. We didn't need to evacuate. It wasn't even the big one. He smirked and walked out of the house with Cricket. Do you think the storm is really over, Armani? Celia asked, standing all squished up against me. Looks like it is. I wish that Mama and Daddy or Mima would smile or something so my nerves could take a rest. But then Georgie screamed at the top of his lungs from the front yard. Celia's fingers dug into my arm. Mima and Mama gave each other the most frightful look. Daddy took off running. Chapter 15. We all jumped up and ran outside behind Daddy. What is it, son? Daddy asked out of breath. Georgie pointed. We all saw it. No one said a word. Everything was going in slow motion. The air sat in perfect stillness. A wall of water, black, rumbling, swirling, groaning wall of water was crashing towards us. I looked down where the tire shop sat, except it wasn't where it was supposed to be. It had been knocked clean off its blocks and was floating sideways in the direction of the donut shop. I could hear windows shattering, houses breaking, and people screaming. The trees left standing fell like toothpicks, disappearing altogether, and the ground hummed and vibrated. The water rose as it rolled closer and closer, and Mama picked up Kayla and Colleen in one scoop and ran back inside the house, and she let out a long, constant stream of, No, 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 no. Celie squeezed my hand so tight it hurt, and I stared at the nightmare barreling toward us. Get inside. Daddy's words boomed into the still, thick air, and we turned and ran for the house. Georgie slammed the door shut and stood with his back pressed up against it. He was pushing hard to keep the water out. Then I seen he was crying. I ain't never in my whole life seen Georgie cry. My heart pounded harder. The roar and rumble got louder and closer, and Daddy put his arm around Georgie and he pulled him gently away from the front door. I want you all to listen to me. I only have time to say this once. The levee must have breached. This is what this has to be. We need to go upstairs right now. But Daddy, we don't have an upstairs. Celie squeaked, cried, her lips quivering. Before Celie finished, Daddy had the rickety old ladder to the attic pulled down, and he was already helping Mima up the loose-looking steps. Mama was next, with one of the twins in her arms and Celie behind her holding tight to the hem of her dress. I ran over and tore the trash bag down so I could see out the broken window, and I couldn't believe what I'd seen. That wall of churning black water was at least as tall as Daddy and was so close I could feel its heartbeat. I couldn't stop staring at it. The loud, rumbling sound of water monster filled my head. Armani, Daddy yelled. He had me in his arms and was forcing me up the attic ladder, and I was still wearing Mima's rubber boots, and my feet kept slipping off the steps. Daddy's body pressed against mine to keep me from falling. I was almost to the top of the ladder when the front door and all of the windows exploded at the same time, and a tidal wave came plowing into our house. Everyone in the attic screamed and sobbed, and Daddy pushed me hard from behind, forcing me to move where I was frozen in the ladder. I looked behind me, and I was shoulder deep in the inky, black, foamy water, and then I seen it. Mama's black velvet Jesus, smeared with sky blue buttermilk frosting, floated out the window and into the rolling darkness. Chapter 16. Daddy slammed the door shut to our horrible tiny attic, and it was hot. So hot the air felt like it was on fire when I sucked it in. It even smelled hot. It was dark, and we coughed and cried, and we didn't talk. We waited. We huddled together in one big Curtis clump on the attic's crooked plywood floor, squished into a corner as far as possible from the door that held the water back. The roar of raging waters destroying our house had stopped, but for a long while the water rushing below us churned and pushed the sound of everything we called home being washed away. The roof rattled and shook, giving me the constant unsettling feeling that the wind was going to rip it clean off. And the scariest time was when everything got all quiet and still. None of us was crying or talking. I was scared to make any noise, and I didn't want the water to find us. Then the sweetest sound filled my ears. Mima went to humming one of her hymns real soft, sitting there in the dark, all wrapped up in fear. Came the angels' music. A calm settled over me and settled over all of us. We stayed that way for a good long while, letting Mima's voice carry us from one long minute to the next. Mama, I hot, Caleb broke the spell. I know, honey, Mama said in a normal voice, like we weren't stuck in the attic. I'm hot too, Mama, Celie yelled. Cricket was breathing fast, her tongue lay out across my arm. Yeah, George's face came out of the dark. It's 200 degrees up here. Daddy, it feels like we're running out of air. Mr. Curtis, Mama said, what should we do? The twins started fussing. Mima's humming got louder, and everyone hang on and try to stay calm, Daddy said, moving around. There was a thunk, and he muddled, ouch. Daddy, you all right? Me and Georgie asked. I'm fine. I hit my head on the ceiling. What I need is a flashlight. Celie foobled something next to me. Here, Daddy. And just like that, a bright beam of light shot across the attic, shining right in Daddy's face, and meanwhile something stopped. Daddy put his hand up to block the light. Celie, where'd you get a flashlight? From my book sack. Well, I'll be, Daddy said, and he was admiring his straight A report card. Daddy said like he was admiring a straight A report card. Mima was soaked in sweat. She looked more tired than I'd ever seen her in my whole life. You okay, Mima? She took a hold of my hand and both of hers and squeezed. Tears rolled down my cheek, and I wiped my face on my sleeve. I fanned her the best I could with my other hand, and Daddy took the flashlight from Celie and made his way to the attic door. I knew what he was fixing to do, and part of me was excited that our horrible time in the stifling attic was about over. Daddy would open that door, and we'd climb back downstairs and start cleaning up whatever the mess the water had left, and I'd run the whole way to Tay-Tay's. But my good sense wanted to scream, Daddy, don't open it. Daddy pulled the door handle and nothing happened, and the door didn't budge an inch. His forehead scrunched up, and he reached up and adjusted his bandage, and he gnawed on his bottom lip. Daddy gave the flashlight to Georgie and told him to shine it so he could see what it was doing. Then he heaved so hard his arms shook, and the door let out a creak, and it popped, and it flew open, and Daddy fell backwards onto his butt. The stink of floodwater slammed into the stuffy attic, and a strange gray-white flickery light came rising from below. Someone let out a gasp, but my heart sank down to my toes. Invisible hands reached down deep inside me and stole the air right from my lungs. Water. Dirty, oily, foamy water all the way up to the top of the attic steps sloshed back and forth, and Mama whimpered and shushed the twins, or maybe she was shushing herself. Celie had her head buried in Georgie's lap, and Mima started humming again. It wasn't a soothing sound like before, it sounded more like hum crying. Daddy stood with his head hanging low as he could go. All the tallness of him was gone. Are we going to die? I almost whispered. Daddy barely lifted his head and he looked at me, and one tear left a wet line down his face. I'm serious. This time I shouted. My heart was about to leap out of my chest. Are we going to die? I want to know. My whole body shook and Celie was sobbing. Daddy came to me and wrapped me in his arms, and I buried my face against his chest. He stroked my hair and rocked me. Shh, it's all right, Armani, he said with a sniffle. Nobody's going to die. But Daddy, the water, we're stuck up here forever. He took my head in his big hands and looked me straight on. Now listen, I want all of you to listen. He cleared his throat. We're going to be all right. We're not stuck up here forever. The water's not rising anymore and should start receding soon. Now let's all try to stay calm. And he took a deep breath. We're going to be fine. Are you sure, Daddy? I asked. I'm sure, sweetheart, he said, and he smiled. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. Promise? His smile faded. He pulled my head up against his chest with my ear pressed to the spot where his heart beat the loudest. He kissed the top of my head and whispered in my ear, I promise. Chapter 17. The dim, shimmery gray glow coming off the water gave us enough light so we could see most of the attic, and I was mesmerized by the sight of it. I got lost staring into the water that filled our house like a fishbowl, and all the things drifted by, and I seen a sippy cup, my math book, lots of clothes, and Mama and Daddy's gold frames wedding picture. Mima's TV watching chair was down there, just bobbing up and down, almost dancing. I seen a paper plate still holding jambalaya float by real slow, and when I seen Kyla's pretty baby doll float with one eye open and one eye closed, I jumped back from the sight, and I tore my eyes away from the water and sadness below. I gave Cricket a hug and poured water into my cupped hand for her to drink, and Daddy and Georgie fished out maybe 10 or 12 bottles of water that Mama had been saving just in case, and I closed my eyes and drifted to sleep. Colleen wheezing loud, and I pushed the annoying sound away so I could keep sleeping, and the wheezing stopped, and I sat up straight. Dear God, he's not breathing, Mama screamed. Lay him down, Daddy held back. Here, Catherine, lay him here. Daddy patted the wood floor with the flat of his hand. Why is he having so many attacks? I screamed, and no one answered. Mima turned her head away and stared at nothing but the floor beside her. Daddy did CPR while Mama rubbed Colleen's head, begging God to let their baby live. Colleen let out a cough and started to cry. Okay, that's it, Daddy said, and got to his feet. He couldn't stand up all the way because the ceiling was too low, but he sure seemed tall right then. You children get in that corner. He pointed to a dark area of the far side of the attic. Catherine and Mama Jean get over here, too. We squished together the best we could in a crowded space. I wanted y'all to look down and cover your eyes. What are you fixing to do, Daddy? Georgie asked. We're getting out of here. Now close your eyes. And with that, Daddy went to pounding on the ceiling of our attic. I was scared that Daddy might have suffered some kind of serious damage with all the blows he'd been taking to his head. He looked like a crazy man punching the heck out of that ceiling with his hands. Georgie was on his feet, scuttling around, and picked up something and went over to Daddy. Here, Daddy, try this. Daddy took it. Where'd you find this, son? Over by them boxes. What is it? It's your Papa's old walking stick, Mima said. Hearing her voice sent a wave of happy through me. You're going to like this, George. Unscrew the end of it. Daddy twisted the end. Like this? Mm-hmm, she said, with a twinkle in her eye. And I hugged her arm, and Mima was back. The wooden end fell to the floor, and out of the end of Papa's walking stick was a sharp metal spike. Well, I'll be, Daddy said. What's this, some kind of secret sword? Georgie asked. Mima sat up straight as she could against the hard 2x4 wood beam. Well, something like that. Your Papa called it his poker, and he never left the house without it. There was a look of remembering in her eye, and it wasn't safe for an old man to go off walking by himself on the streets of New Orleans. Your Papa was sure to enjoy his long walks after supper. Mama took a long, deep breath and coughed. And one day he asked old man Riley to fix him some assurance to the end of his darn walking stick, and good old Riley did. Papa called it his poker. And from that day on, he never went nowhere without it. She looked over at me and Celie with a little grin that always made me smile. You know what else he never left home without? What? A kiss from me, that's what. And she sighed a happy sigh. Yes, indeed. Daddy drilled about 50 quarter-size holes in the ceiling, make it so I could get a good fix on the sky, and the gray of the sky matched the gray everywhere else, but seeing outside reminded me that there was something beside the attic. The wind was gusting hard, and it whistled as it blew in and out of the flute holes all over the ceiling. I swear I felt like the house was going to flip over, or maybe just because, say, take sailing off into the sky like Dorothy's house in The Wizard of Oz. It creaked and groaned and rattled so bad that it most likely shook the nails loose. A constant drip fell from the holes, making a tink tink sound on the lopsided plywood floor. Water was under us, and water was falling outside, and water was coming in, and there was nowhere to go. Mima patted her shoulder, letting me know that she wanted me to rest her head here, and she gently rubbed my leg with her fingertips, causing a tiny tickle. She sipped one of them hard. She slipped one of them hard caramels into my hand, and her finger held her finger to her mouth. She winked. I unwrapped the candy and plopped it into my mouth, and it was the best piece I ever had. It was sweeter and juicier than usual. I was going to ask her where hers was, but I didn't want to give away our secret. How you doing, child? I'm okay, Mima. You all right? Oh, I'm going to be fine, darling. And we sat like that, just being close for a good while. Armani, I have something I want to give you. Mima reached down inside the neckline of the yellow house dress and pulled out her locket. Would you be so kind to unhook me, dear? But Mima, she shook her crooked finger at me. Please do this for your old Mima and don't argue. Her eyes were watery and tired, and I reached behind her and unlatched the necklace. She kissed it before putting it on me. Mima patted the locket resting near where my heart sits and said, Yes, indeed, that is special. But Mima, why are you giving this to me? This is your special locket. I know what it is, child, but it's not mine no more. Truth is, it never really was. Mima opened the locket, and inside was a tiny dial under glass with a needle that bounced around and finally settled on the letter N to the top left. I rubbed my thumb, careful like, across the little glass dome protecting the compass, and Mima lifted her glasses up off her nose to swipe the sweat that had pooled up there. Nested up inside the lid of the locket was a tiny little speck of picture of Mama about my age sitting on a porch swing with Mima. You and Mama so beautiful. Thank you, baby. I like to say we come from a long line of beautiful women. Legend has it the women in our family keep getting more beautiful with each new generation, she smiled. Happy, warm love spread to my heart to my cheeks. I put that picture in there for you the day you were born, Nene, and I've been waiting for the right time to give it to you. My mama gave this compass locket to me when I married your dear papa, she said, and it would help me if I ever lost my way home. Mima's eyes got far off, and she let out a long sigh, and I wanted to give it to you yesterday on your birthday, but everything got so busy. A huge pounding and rumble of thunder shook the house like we needed reminding as to why yesterday got so busy. I wrapped my arms around her and the best I could from a sit and squeezed tight. Thanks, Mima. Keep it close to your heart, and you know what? You know that's where I'll always be. And she kissed my forehead. Mama swiped a tear sliding down her face, and she smiled and blew me a kiss across the shadowy attic. The sky turned dark and ugly again, wrapping us up in darkness. The rain poured down sideways, and the wind kept most of it from coming straight down and onto the pitiful, tore up, leaky attic. I rested my head on Mima's shoulder, and with the locket tucked safe inside the palm of my hand, her shoulder was wet from sweat, and my eyes got heavier and heavier.